All right, I was so excited to come up here, I dropped my microphone right off my pants. That's a good way to start, don't you think? Well, guys, I gotta tell you, I wasn't raised in church. I have an atheist upbringing, and I come from a part of our country where our culture is not a majority religious. And so my exposure to Christianity was extremely limited. Actually, I tease people. I say it's what I saw on television in the movies. So it wasn't really good. But what I did have growing up in Oregon, in the Portland, Oregon area, was exposure to the great beauty of that area. And my dad was a huge lover of all things camping. And so he took us camping up and down the northwest coastline in a bright orange 1974 VW camper van, which apparently is like cool now, not back then. But that's what we did. And my dad was a lover of all things science and all of the arts. And so though I didn't have an upbringing in Christianity, I was exposed to lots of thoughts about the universe in which we live. I had wonder and awe at the sciences. I had wonder and awe at the arts, the beauty that humans can make, the beauty that I saw all around me in nature. And I started to wonder, what is this all for? What is this all for? Well, at about the same time that I'm getting older, my high school years, I had a band director who kind of was like another dad to me. And he was a Christian who hadn't shared his faith with anyone, not publicly, and certainly not to a public school student for fear of losing his job. But he was burdened for me. He was so burdened for me that he couldn't let me graduate without giving me a Bible. And when I was about to graduate and go off to college, he handed me a Bible and he said, when you go off to college, you're going to have hard questions. I hope you'll turn to this. Well, as I received that, which I guess I didn't say anything great to him because he thought he was going to get turned in. So my response must not have been wonderful. But I took it and I read it and I started to see where all this goodness and beauty and truth that I was seeing in the world and in the universe, where it was coming from. And so oddly, when I went off to college, I started looking for God. I actually became a Christian in college. It's funny because we're always worried the kids are going to go off to college and lose faith. And I went off to college and found it. And I also found my husband there as a young college student. So I was married young. I found Jesus young in college. And so I could tell you, being far away from home and having all this in my life, that was an emotionally messy time for me. It was tough. I was dealing with a lot. I had the joy of my salvation, but I also had this concern about, well, what would people back home think of what I've done? So I wasn't raised this way. And what will this new group of people I'm going to, what will they think about me? The church. Because again, girl from the Pacific Northwest, no makeup, short, spiky hair, coming to a church as a brand new believer in a Southern evangelical church. I knew nothing of this culture. So my husband, who was a born and raised Southern Baptist from a small town in Oklahoma, he is like, we got to get in church. So we go. And by the way, we went on the invitation of one of his old girlfriends. Sketchy or not? I don't know. So we went, and that day that we were going to go, I was really nervous. Because like I said, it was messy, right? It was emotionally messy. And so I'm worrying about stuff like, what am I going to wear? I think I should wear a dress because that's what I've seen on TV. But I only own 2 dresses, so I just picked the one that I think is right, and I'm asking my husband, do I look good? Is this okay? And he's like, all right, stop worrying. You look fine. So we go to the church, and this, I'm kind of skipping bits here for you, but this is after I had already accepted Jesus. Like the pastor had already come to our house and talked to me, and I had accepted Jesus, and now I'm going to church for the first time as a new believer. That's why I'm fussing. This is like a big deal for me, because I have to walk up the aisle in front of everybody, and I have to profess that I found Jesus, and they're all going to come up and tell me, hey, congratulations, it's wonderful. I don't know if your church does that. Ours did. So that's making me nervous, because I was a religion is private Pacific Northwesterner. So all of that's going into this. My husband and I, we walk up to the church for that first day as a new believer coming into this church. And as we approach the sanctuary, there's a pastor's wife there that is greeting everybody. Hey, how are you? How's it going? How are you doing? How are the kids? And as we approach, she's smiling, and then she looks at me, looks me up and down. Her smile drops, and she says, oh, honey, we need to find you better clothes. That was not what I was expecting. You know, I told you I didn't know what, but I was really excited about what I had found. And that goes back to what I was reading in the scriptures, like there's no condemnation in Christ. The first thing I get on my first day in church as a new believer is judgmentalism, this condemnation about how I look. I wish I could tell you that was it. I wish I could tell you that was the worst thing that had ever happened. But I think you already know that that's not true. In fact, over the years, my husband and I got involved in ministry, and we've been in ministry for 3 decades. And over those years, I have seen a lot of things, a lot more things, and much worse, from the people who profess God as the standard of goodness. From people who profess God as loving. In fact, my experience in church was so bad at times and so opposite as to what I was reading in the Bible, it made me wonder, do Christians really believe what they profess? How could people who profess the Bible as God's truth completely ignore its teaching or do exactly what the Bible says they shouldn't? And as I thought more and more on this and experienced more and more of this, I began to have serious doubt about what I had believed in. And I ended up wanting to leave the church and wanting to leave Christianity altogether. So I will say that my relationship with the Christian church has been rocky. In fact, the tension of what drew me to faith versus what I found in the church really threw me. So I had to work through some reasons for why I stayed when other people are leaving or letting go. But there was something going on in my journey that doesn't typically get addressed when we talk apologetics. It wasn't just that I needed answers to my questions. Is that there was other stuff going on. My desires, my motives. I was hurt. I had experienced spiritual abuse. I wanted to find Christianity untrue. So there were attitudes that I was taking in my journey of doubt that could have hindered it. So what we're going to do in this session, as you've been gaining all these arguments, like we did the problem of evil in my session, argument for existence of God, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to look at 3 mindsets that you can take that can help your journey of doubt, or it might hinder your journey of doubt. And those 3 mindsets are to be skeptical, be realistic, and be extensive. I'll bring these up again as we go through them. Let's start with be skeptical. So what we want to be in our doubt journey is to be skeptical, but not cynical. Skeptical, not cynical. You see, skepticism has actually kind of gotten a bad rap within the Christian faith. For a long time, we used this term, at least in my lifetime, to mean that it was not a good thing. Like skepticism was bad. Like it was the opposite of faith or something. So it kind of gets a bad rap. But actually, the Bible affirms a healthy skepticism? Let's look at some passages that do this work for us. Proverbs 18:17, the one who states his case first seems right until another comes along and examines him. Right? That's so important. A lot of times when I talk to people, they just want to make their statement and move on. No. You need to be examined. Right? That's what the Bible is saying. And in fact, Ephesians 4 tells us that you've been given all these teachers and the apostles and all these people in the community of the church, in your Christian community, for the purpose of growing and maturing in your knowledge of God. It's to grow up. And what I love about our authors in the Bible, I love a lot of things, but one of the things I love, especially Paul, Luke writes that Paul didn't even exempt himself from this. And you see that in Acts 17:11. He's praising the Bereans. He praises them because they went and checked out what he taught them, right? They're of more noble character. In fact, he also teaches us, if you look at the Thessalonians passage, test everything, hold on to the good. That doesn't mean just test everything out there. This, in context, this scripture is test the prophecies you're hearing in a church. The teachings in the church, test those, hold on to the good. So what am I doing with all this? A proper skepticism actually helps you mature as a believer, helps you grow up in your faith. But the problem is an unhealthy skepticism. An unhealthy skepticism can lead to cynicism. So whereas the healthy skeptic just doesn't believe whatever anyone tells them, the cynic typically moves away from that into distrusting people. So the unhealthy skeptic, the cynic, tends to not just question beliefs and look for, fact check and try to find that evidence. They distrust people. And typically that comes as a result of having trusted people and been burned by it over and over and over. But cynicism is problematic. It can be detrimental to you emotionally. But it can, as far as apologetics, as far as our understanding of God, cynicism can lead a person to judge an argument, idea, or belief before exploring the evidence and reason. Or sometimes it can cause a person to set such an unrealistic criteria that criteria can never be met. So you can see some potential instances of cynicism. There's a lot of factors going on in the Bible with the religious leaders, but I think you can see some potential cynics in there with how the religious leaders respond to Jesus. And that they're not looking for, are you actually the Messiah? But they're looking to trap him. And there's even one point at which Jesus is before the chief priests and the scribes in Luke 22, and they ask him, hey, if you are the Christ, just tell us. That's easy, right? We're just asking you a simple question. Jesus knows what's happening, and he says, if I tell you, you will not believe. So even though Jesus had performed so many signs and reasoned with them, they still wouldn't believe. Cynicism becomes problematic for us it is problematic for anyone, really, because cynicism robs the person of the ability to trust and believe anything. Cynicism sets us up for closed-mindedness. So what happens when I engage a cynic, or that cynic is myself? The cynic tends to think they have a more objective view because they're asking all these questions and they seem like they're really, thinking through stuff. But I would agree that they have actually a less objective view because they've fallen prey to unhealthy skepticism. So what do we do about unhealthy skepticism leading to how do we check ourselves on this? Well, there's an academic Christian writer, Daniel Taylor, who he says this about it. Here's his check on skepticism, from keeping it from moving into that other category of the cynic. He says, be as skeptical about skepticism as skepticism is about everything else. So I'll interpret that my way as question your motive for questioning, instead of just everybody else's motives for believing. Taylor notes that if you think you're a skeptic, then consider what good answers would look like to your questions. And this is where it gets tough, because good answers to your questions typically will cause you to change, or at least push you on to bigger, greater things. And that's why they're hard. This was one of the difficulties that I faced, the motive issue. Having been hurt in the church, I have all of that wrapped up in this analytic side of me, where I'm trying to work through the arguments. I'm trying to figure out what it is I actually think is real, and I'm trying to do that with all of this going on. And so I had come to understand that I wasn't just looking for answers, but that I was angry. I was angry. It shouldn't be like this. And that was one of the main issues for driving, for the whole search for these answers. So what I had to tell myself, what I had to tell my inner atheist, was that believing in something isn't a fault. It's a good thing. So the first mindset is to be skeptical, but not cynical. The second one is to be realistic, not unrealistic. I know that one's real life-changing, right? You couldn't have come up with that one. Be realistic, not unrealistic. This one's really important for me because I tend to be an idealist. I'm a youngest child. There's some merit to we're the idealists. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Be realistic. What happened with me is when I was coming into the church, I did not have church informing my reading of the Bible. I didn't have commentaries. I didn't have Logos back then. I do now, and I do not share it. My husband has to get his own. And I am a monster with it. I am one of those up till 2 a.m.s with it, looking at 10 different commentaries at once. And it's just going to get worse with AI, guys. I'm going to be there forever. It's going to suck me in like Tron. Sorry, that was a side note. All right, back to the story. What are we talking about here? All right, so because I didn't have any of these helps, I was just reading the Bible myself and saying, oh, this is what I want. This is going to provide me what I'm actually looking for. I want what this Bible has to offer. What do I mean by that? These kind of scriptures. When I saw the love that Christians were supposed to have for each other, when I saw how we're not supposed to be doing anything from selfish ambition, but have all this humility and respecting others as greater than or more significant than ourselves, and when I saw that James passage about if you don't hold your tongue, if you can't control your tongue, your religion is worthless. I was like, yes, I want that. These people have got it, right? So the Christians are going to be the ones that practice this stuff, and they are going to be the pros at it. So I loaded that up into my mental backpack, and I was taking that with me into church. But my expectations were horribly unrealistic. So now I see that I didn't just begin to doubt because the Christians I encountered failed spectacularly to meet my expectations, but also because I brought spectacularly unrealistic expectations with me into the church. You guys, when I discovered that church people were just regular people, I was actually really disappointed. Very disappointed. When I discovered that church people have all the same problems as everybody else in the world, I was a bit heartbroken. I wanted something more. So I needed to gain a perspective. Why do people act like this? Why are people in the church still this way, even though they profess Jesus, even though they profess God as the standard of good? What is going on? I need some perspective. And that led me into this argument, the problem of evil, which we're not going to go through because I did that in my session, but I'm going to kind of explain what this gave me in relationship to my unrealistic expectations. So as I encountered the problem of evil, which is the argument, if God is good, then why is there evil in the world? And all the responses to that. Here's what I discovered. When God made us in his own image, one of the areas in which we reflect him is the ability to make real choices with real consequences. That's a good gift. That reflects God. And we can use that in order to choose to love others and to love God. But we've used that gift, that good gift, to do things that are not good. We've used it to do evil. Right? And the consequence of doing something evil in this world is destruction. You see that in Romans 6:23. The wages of sin is death. Right? The product of doing evil is destruction, death. So as I was doing that problem of evil, as I was looking at this and thinking about it, what that did was it taught me that people in the church are human beings who will fail me in every way possible. Because that's what people do in this world. And I am one of them. I am going to fail them as well. We have used our good gifts of freedom to act destructively towards ourselves, towards everyone else. And this is why everyone needs a Savior. Because none of us escape doing evil. In fact, as you see in Romans there is none who do good, no, not one. Right? Couple that with there is only one who is good, God alone. So I learned also that the other big revelation for me was that people were going to be this way in the church and outside of the church. This problem doesn't go away if I leave the Christian community. It's still there because it's a people problem. So here was the question, as I was considering that, human nature is still human nature, whether you are a Christian or not a Christian. So then I started thinking, well, what do I do now? Now I know that. What am I going to do with that? I don't have to come up with an answer because you know what? Jesus taught about it in the Sermon on the Mount. He taught us what to do in the Sermon on the Mount. When he said, love your enemies. He said, do good to those who persecute you. Whatever you want for you, do that for others. He did not say, if they do good to you. In fact, he's specifically saying against that. Do what you want done to you. Do good to those who persecute you, are not doing good to you. Right? Love your enemies. And I love how G.K. Chesterton, this author from the last century, is kind of snarky. He says this, the Bible tells us to love our neighbors and to love our enemies, probably because they are generally the same people. Yes, thank you, Chesterton. But what this means for me is I can choose God's goodness in spite of those who would hurt me. And here's the point for that. You guys, that is more realistic. Jesus' teaching here is more realistic than just wishing that everybody would do the right thing. You do good. You love your enemy. Don't wait for everybody else. You do good. And what that did for me was it allowed me to adjust my expectations and to focus on what I could do in the situation that I was in, instead of just wishing everybody else would get their act together. And if I had been paying attention to my Bible a little more closely, I would have read the whole chapter, Matthew 23, a little more intently, and seen Jesus condemning the hypocrisy of the church leaders, the religious leaders, saying, hey, do what they're teaching you, but don't do what they do. Not all church leaders are those people, so I'm going to put that out there. But if they're acting hypocritically, Jesus has already spoken on that. And that's what I was experiencing. He said, do what they teach, but not what they do, because they don't practice what they preach. He's already told me this is happening, and I just wasn't paying attention. So perhaps we can adjust our expectations to more realistic ones for the kind of world in which we live. Okay, so we need to be skeptical, not cynical, realistic, not unrealistic. And then this last one, which is kind of funny, be extensive, not restrictive. As I considered my conflicted state in the church, I realized that in order to leave, not only was I going to just look at Christianity and say, that's wrong, or look at this, or see what they're doing in this church, or that. I had to actually look at, well, what am I leaving to? What is that? So I couldn't just critique, because if I just critique Christianity, that would be restricting my viewpoint. I needed to be extensive and open up my viewpoint to look at, well, what would I be going to? And that was difficult for me, because I was experiencing hurt while I was having to think this way. But in order to do this, I had to think back, well, how do you do that? How do you broaden it out? I had to think back to, and I knew I was going to nerd out for a little bit here because I am a professor. I had to go back to my basic philosophical assumptions. What do I believe about these kinds of questions? What are my assumptions that I'm living with? So everybody lives with basic assumptions, whether you've worked on learning about them or not. And these four are kind of sum up your basic assumptions. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? How should we live? Now, philosophers nuance this language, but this is a good starter pack to start thinking on. If you're going to challenge your beliefs, the basic assumptions have to be part of that challenge. And the reason why we need to be extensive like this and look at these basic assumptions is because we need to think about what are the basic assumptions of whatever it is I'm leaving to. So restricted view would be, do I still believe the stuff that I used to believe in? That's a restricted look. An extensive look would be, do I believe the stuff that is there if I leave the stuff I used to believe in? Stuff's the philosophical term here for assumptions. This is the point at which this right here, thinking on my basic philosophical assumptions, was where leaving Christianity got difficult for me. I couldn't leave the Christian philosophical framework. In rejecting Christianity, I'm not just stepping away from a book, thank you TikTok influencers, and I'm not just stepping away from the church, again, TikTok influencers. If you were in my problem of evil class or session, you know how I feel about that. I'm not just stepping away from a book, I am stepping away from a philosophical framework that informs my entire view of myself, the world, everything. And that was a big concern for me. The reason this is such a big concern for me is I had to ask myself, what philosophical framework do you actually believe? What philosophical framework do you actually believe? So as I began to dig into debates and arguments on Christianity and atheism, I discovered that my philosophical framework was indeed Christian. I'll give you one of them, which is the question, who are we? What does it mean to be human? And we're going to do this fast, real fast. So when I was growing up, I came out of what's called atheist. I was an atheist materialist. And what that means is described here by Madeleine Murray O'Hair. She's a famous American atheist. Atheism is based on a materialist philosophy that holds that nothing exists but natural phenomena. There are no supernatural forces, there's no supernatural entities, nor can there be. Nature simply exists. So what she's saying is, everything's made of material matter. There's nothing immaterial. Nothing immaterial, that's gonna be important. Then, Richard Dawkins, the Oxford biologist, he works this out for you, he unpacks it. And he says, in a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, this is a long one, just hang with me. Some people are gonna get hurt, other people get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason to it or in it, nor any justice. He carries on with, the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is a bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. Then he goes back to that idea that we're all just made of material matter, there's no immaterial stuff. DNA neither knows nor cares, DNA just is, and we dance to its music. So let me give this to you in short. There are no immaterial aspects of being human. All these immaterial ideas, such as intention and purpose to human life, justice, good and evil, they're all ultimately non-existent things. The material universe doesn't have these immaterial properties. Not at the base of the universe. Then there's some arguments about where they come from, but not at the base of the universe. They just don't exist. The problem that I had with this is that the human experience and human identity are quite entwined in the very real existence of these immaterial things, such as love, hate, equality, justice, good, evil, purpose, intention. And I came to realize what they were telling me, these do not have a source in atheism. So as you can see from these quotes, what I found for myself was when I stopped believing in a philosophical framework that includes these things and gives a basis for them, like gives a basis for the human identity and experience as found in these things, I lose too much. I lose too much. So further, what was so deeply disturbing to me, not only did I lose too much, but his view communicates hopelessness. This Dawkins quote. He's saying that the world is the way we should expect it to be, as opposed to there's something wrong. Things aren't the way they're supposed to be. But if everything is just as it's supposed to be, then there's no reason for redemption or forgiveness or second chances. There's no reason for hope. And that's a big part of our faith. And consider this, because my mind thinks this way, so it's going to get a little crazy. Consider this. If Dawkins and Madeline Murray O'Hara are correct, we humans got stuck here with the randomly evolved ability to think about meaning, purpose, and value to our lives in a universe in which there is none to be found. We are stuck here thinking there's a way things should be, a right and wrong, in a universe in which there is no right and wrong. This is what the atheists used to call the angst of a purposeless universe. So I had to ask myself, do I believe these things about the universe? Is this my philosophical framework? So do I believe good and evil are non-existent? And that the world is as we should expect it to be? Do I believe humans are just a complex collection of physical matter with no ultimate material aspects such as purpose, intention, value, or meaning to their lives? No, I don't. But you guys, I never have. I never have. But I can't have it both ways. I can't walk away from Christianity and then hold onto the Christian philosophical framework. And that's what I see so many people doing today. Now, I'm not saying that people are bad who do this, and I'm not saying that people don't have reasons why this happens, but I will tell you it's not a buffet out there. You don't walk up to the belief restaurants and go, okay, maybe I'll go to the buffet restaurant and I'll choose a little atheism and I'll choose a little Christianity and I'll choose a little. What I'm telling you is that the experience is more like entering in a search on Yelp for a belief restaurant. And when you hit the filters, you're like, believes in good and evil as real things, believes that human life has meaning, purpose, and value, believes that, and it X's out all those other ones. Right? It doesn't even give you those options. So it's not a buffet, it's more like a Yelp search. All right, so let's bring this to where I'm at and wrap it up. Though my experience in the church with a lot of hurt caused me to doubt my belief in God and caused me to want to walk away, it was searching through not just the answers, but also my desires and my motive and how I got to this point, and checking my skepticism that got me back to thinking, wait a second, there is a place for me in Christianity. There is a place. Going through this has taught me that I am a skeptic, and that's okay. I am a questioner, and that's all right. I'm also idealistic, and Jesus is the one I can idealize instead of anybody in the church. And that I've always been full of hope for mankind, and Christianity provides me that grounding. So what I'm going to do, since Jeremiah brought up the Star Wars fandom, it's also Lord of the Rings too. Where I'm at now with the church is I'm going to Obi-Wan it. The people that I love the most are the ones that are going to do the worst kinds of things and hurt me the most. And that's okay, guys, because what Jesus taught me, what my master taught me, was the good. And I'm going to continue to do what my master taught me, even in the face of hurt and pain and hypocrisy. I'm going to stick to the good, the true, and the beautiful because of our living, loving, and redeeming God. Thank you, guys.